Welcome everybody to the Microsoft 365 platform community call. It is 22nd of March 2022. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a program manager. Product manager. They changed our titles. No longer program manager, product manager in the Microsoft 365 platform side of the house. And today we'll have a great set of demos and content coming up, followed up on our typical intro and going through the latest news. Now, most likely we'll have just a word of a warning. Most likely we'll have a bit of a lower attendance today because of the time zone differences. For those who are not aware, and the global world is a bit of a challenge always, because during the autumn and springtime, US actually moves to summertime in a different schedule than, for example, Europe. So therefore the Europe and US time zones are a bit different, and that might actually cause some differences depending on where the meeting has been created. And that's the crazy piece of all of this. So that's why things are shuffled in an interesting way. Now, anyway, it's not a promotion, it's a title change, not a program manager, product manager. But anyway, so, but good to have celebrations. We should always find reasons to celebrate. Let's get moving, and we'll go through the typical set of slides first and the latest news, and then we'll have 3 demos today from Rajib, Anui, and then Sebastian as the last one on this thing. So really good coverage on the Microsoft Graph, Microsoft Teams development, and Microsoft Graph Toolkit with Teams. So it is a Graph and Teams specific call today. Let's actually move on to the typical slides. Just to recap on the assets which we have, and I know that we're always having this slide, but that is intentional. We want to make sure that you are aware from where you can find the latest information. And after every single call, I get requests on how do I get access on the recording. The easiest way to get access on the recording is to go to our Microsoft 365 community YouTube videos channel, from where you can open recordings in typically less than 24 hours after the call has happened. You cannot access the call recording directly from the chat, even though you see the link there, because of the permission setups between the tenants. So that's the reason for that. We do have 2 different YouTube channels. The other one is for official developer Microsoft 365 videos coming from Cloud Advocates and engineering and our marketing. And the community one is the one where we have community-driven videos from you and people presenting in these calls, and also all of the community call recordings as well. We have a lot of open source assets available across different areas in Microsoft 365. We have sample galleries, which are great for accessing and finding the right sample for you. And if you're wondering that there's too many URLs to remember, luckily there's only one, which is the AKMS M365 PMP, and that is our Microsoft 365 platform community location. I should actually update the image because that welcome page looks a bit different, not too much different, but still. One of the things which we always promote here is that please remember to register to our Microsoft 365 developer program. As you do that, you will get a free E5 developer tenant with 25 accounts in that tenant. As long as you use that developer tenant for development purposes, and there's some instrumentation in place, it will automatically renew in 90 days, which is really, really cool. So as long as you use development tooling, as long as you use deployed development stuff, and as long as you use connectivity on the development side of the house, it will basically detect that, oh, you're actually using it for development, not just taking advantage of the free tenants, and we will renew that automatically for you. The second update always is that we have a lot of training material available for you. So if you're a new person looking into how would I exactly get started on Microsoft Graph or Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Viva, how do I build extensions for SharePoint portals? Well, we got you covered. We have 74 training modules currently on the Microsoft 365 platform on different areas depending on your need. And these are really, really cool. And many of them are like 30 minutes or 1.5 hours, and you can easily catch up on what are the extensibility options on the different areas of Microsoft 365. So really, really cool and valuable content to take advantage. On the sample side of the house, we have this unified Microsoft 365 sample gallery, which technically we haven't officially launched or released yet from a blog announcement perspective, but we're going to do that quite soon as we get certain small adjustments to be done. Already today, there's more than 1,200 samples listed in this one centralized location from Microsoft and from community. And just to recap what this is basically intended to be the easiest way to find a starting point for you as to start implementing something. Somebody was I guess it was earlier today in the YouTube channel, somebody was asking that, hey, do we have a people search functionalities in Microsoft 365 or kind of an organizational chart? And the easiest way to find out is to go to this location, do a search, people, organization, chart, or whatever you're looking for, and voila, it will actually give you a starting point, typically as a sample where somebody else has contributed, either Microsoft or community member, it's for others to take advantage. And all of those samples are MIT licensed, which means that you can take advantage of them as a starting point or learn the pattern or understand the technology, which is really, really cool as well. Now, as you're wondering on how would I then get started on using those samples, so if you don't feel comfortable of doing that, luckily we do have you covered as well. And David can explain what our Sharing is Caring program does.
Thank you, Vesa. Yeah, friends, all those samples are contributed by amazing contributors like you, but we understand there may be some hurdles in the way for allowing you to submit them or even use them, see how to make changes, and resubmit them back. That is a fully qualified contribution in and of itself. The way you can do that, if you're not sure, join one of the Sharing is Caring sessions. They are hands-on, live, safe space opportunities for you to ask questions, learn how to submit your first pull request via GitHub. Perhaps you've got a Power Platform sample you'd like to submit, or you just want to work within docs, community content, community docs, setting up your workstation, want to present on a session, we got your back. These are free. Safe space, meaning we do not record them, so you can absolutely feel free to ask any and all questions, and we would love to work and collaborate with you. So again, we're going to be scheduling more of these over the next couple months. Some of the scheduling, as you know, I've joined Microsoft as of yesterday, so just kind of getting to know my new schedule and working with the rest of the team to figure out who will run what. So please be patient with us as we get some of those new dates coming. And we have an Ask Me Anything. We're solidifying a date now on Viva Connections with the engineering team. So that's Luca and Pat and John. And so that's going to be a lot of fun as well. Yep. So be on the lookout for that in the next couple of days. We'll get the registration set up for that. So thank you, and Vesa, back to you.
David, and congratulations on starting at Microsoft yesterday. So cool to see that happening, knowing about that happening for a while, but then getting that moving as well. Now, some of the other things, how to get being up to date on Microsoft 365 development. We have two different podcasts. One of them is Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast, hosted by Jeremy Fake and Paul Scheffelin. Jeremy is the Graph CXP lead, so customer extensibility team lead from Microsoft side, and Paul Scheffelin works in Adding 365. The latest podcast on this one is, I guess, 2 weeks ago with Tom Morgan, focuses on the Microsoft Teams development. And then the other one, podcast which we have is the Microsoft 365 PMP Weekly. Latest podcast and a video on that one is released today, and we had Patrick Rogers from the ISV team of OneDrive, SharePoint, and Viva, and visiting us and having a discussion on how would you build a successful open source project, as Patrick is one of the persons leading the PMP.js development, which had a version 3 release quite recently. Now, on the news side of the house, quick recap on those as well. There wasn't a significant amount of new news across the, let's say, the different products, but there was actually 5 news from the Microsoft Teams side of the house. And quickly just pinpointing this, the first one is really about explaining how we at Microsoft are hosting and operating Microsoft Teams. So basically making sure that there's a reliability with disaster recovery and what are our quality assurance processes. Kind of an interesting article related on that one. The second goes through in really cool device innovation in the Microsoft Teams areas now that we are gradually, hopefully, moving back to this hybrid way of working. So some of us will be working from office and some of us will be keep on working from home. And how are those devices taking that kind of a setup into account? The third one is about Teams Connect shared channels. So basically you are able to start sharing individual channels, not the whole team, with external people in your tenant. So that's going to be providing some additional level of flexibility. The fourth one on the left lower corner is actually really, really cool, announcing Operation Connect Mobile and delivering actually the capability that you can have one single number, and as somebody calls to that number, it will ring in your mobile, in your phone, physical phone, in your desktop, or in your PC. So you don't actually have to target the person to which device they're sitting on. Rather, there's this full integration to the actual phone number which people are using, and then it can actually ring directly within your PC. And that's a really, really cool feature. Looking forward of having that for sure. And then the last one is kind of a cool story related on a Sonim XP8, where we will have a walkie-talkie physical button actually inside of that and in the device to start Microsoft Teams integrated walkie-talkie feature. So really cool stuff as well if you are into the devices. Now on the Microsoft Teams document side of the house, I think Sorpi, you will cover this one.
Yeah, thank you, Vesa. Hello, everyone. So I'd walk you through the platform and documentation updates. We'll start from the platform update on the left-hand side. We have two samples to cover. The first one is link unfurling meeting sample. This sample illustrates a common scenario where a user shares a link to a resource with a group of users and they collaborate to review it in a meeting. Anuj Gupta is going to cover the sample in depth in today's demo. The second sample is user-specific view. This sample illustrates a few different ways developers can consume user-specific views in adaptive cards. Specifically, it uses the user action.execute with refresh property, which enables developers to build different views for users in a common chat thread. Developers can consume this action to build different experiences in Teams like user-specific content in shared context like group chat and meeting channels, auto-update information in a card for a user in personal context, all users when they view it in a shared context. Think of updating an order status when a user views the message or an incident status when a user views it. Sequential workflows, where each workflow is an adaptive card with a user-specific view and options to invoke next or preview card. Now let's move to the documentation part on the right. Step-by-step guides is an artifact that has a task-oriented approach, linear topic, provides an end-to-end scenario, and loops you back to the documentation. So we'd be talking about 3 step-by-step guides today. The first one is create callings and meeting bots. Calling and meeting bot provides basic functionalities such as create a call, join a call, transfer or redirect a call, join a scheduled meeting, and invite the participants by integrating cloud communication APIs, graph APIs. This step-by-step guide helps you to create a bot with calling and meeting functionalities. The second one is generate a meeting stage view. This helps to enable and configure your apps for Teams meetings. It helps users to share meeting stage, allow meeting participants to add status details of past, present, and future tasks, enhancing Teams meeting experience. And the third one is your upload files to Team bot. The bot in this step-by-step guide, it helps you to upload files from a bot to Microsoft Teams. So these were the platform and documentation updates. If you have any feedback or suggestion, please post on Teams platform feedback. The link is available in the footer. You could also reach out to us on Twitter and configure to the RSS feeds to get regular platform updates. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Sorpi. Really, really cool stuff. And I really love those task-oriented step-by-step guidance, because they really, really help people to learn on how to get stuff done in the Microsoft Teams. So great job on that. Now, also a quick update on the Learn from the Community series. This is a new series which was started a few weeks back with Aika Bass. She is a senior cloud advocate from the Microsoft 365 Cloud Advocate side of the house. And in this week, she has been talking to Stefan Bisser, Hans Brender, and Thomas Gulls on their Microsoft MVP digital bot, where, well, they're MVPs, but they built this bot in the Microsoft Teams for providing additional information and discussions, which also integrates to Azure Cognitive Services. So really cool setup and great presenters and people explaining what they actually built in here. Now, before we go to the actual stars of the day and the demo or demos of today, let's do a quick group photo. And I did set up the together mode already, but let me do that one more time so we can get everybody hopefully visible there. It seems to be working, and we are waiting around this max 50 seats again on the room. Changing the scene a bit. Not yet. Wait, well, let's wait a few more rows. I'm in the room as well. Yes, I'm actually in the middle as well. So there we go, and that's David. few more seats. I can say Tom. Yeah, Tommy is on the front row as well. I can say a lot of familiar faces. Let's see if we can get a few more people in the room, and then we can start. I will start the recording. 1, 2, 3, 4. yeah, still a few more seats, and let's do some hands waving, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for joining once again today. Really great to have you on the call. It's great to see this diversity on this attendances within this course. So thank you, everybody. We'll grab a GIF animation done. And thank you, Seth, for being an example in the back row again. So really working. Great. Awesome. Let's actually stop that. I will move them away and I will stop the recording, and let's go to the actual stars of today. So we'll start with Raideep, and then we go to Anui, and then Sebastian Levert as the last one of today. But Raideep, I can see you on the call. So let's jump on your screen and move from there.
Sure. So I think we can start off then.
Yep, all good. Take it away.
Yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Rajdeep. I'm from the Microsoft Graph Connectors team. And today I'm going to talk about Microsoft Graph Connectors SDK. So previously also we have talked about this topic, but since then there has been quite some changes that we have made after listening to feedback from you. And we have come up with a new architecture and a few little updates that we have on the SDK. And we are going to cover those. So just briefly, I'll also talk about what are graph connectors. Then we'll jump into the features and capabilities, a little bit on the architecture, and I'll be showing a demo of how you can actually set up a connector using C#. To start off, so graph connectors lets you connect all your data sources, which are third-party external data sources, and bring the data into Microsoft Graph to power intelligent Microsoft 365 experiences. So you may have data sources like file storage, some project data, finance application, anything, right? And we have out-of-the-box connectors to connect all these data sources into Microsoft Graph. Like for file storage, we have a file share connector. For sales and CRM, we have a Salesforce connector. We have intranet connector. We have a ServiceNow connector. And these connectors come out of the box from Microsoft. But let's say you have some line of business applications, some custom database, some project data that you're storing somewhere, and you want to index that content into Microsoft Graph as well. So that is where Microsoft Graph connectors and the custom graph connectors come in essentially. So the ones highlighted in blue are the ones for which you might want to write custom graph connectors on your own. And you can power different scenarios, like search is one of the primary scenarios. And there are also upcoming scenarios like, let's say, e-discovery and Viva topics. So all these things will be powered by the data that will come in through your data sources into Microsoft Graph, right? So moving on today, you can create your line of business connectors or your custom connectors as such for these data sources using Microsoft's Graph Search APIs. But using Graph Search APIs, although you can create your custom connectors, there are a few drawbacks. Like the cost of development is high using these because these are not specifically made for building connectors, and connector specific functionalities are absent. You need to develop them on your own. So reduced feature availability, like I was talking, like e-discovery, Viva topics, and all those things won't come out of the box if you use just Microsoft Graph Search APIs. You also need to build a separate admin experience just to monitor all these custom connectors that you have written. A separate dashboard you'll be needing, where you'll also do some kind of error handling, error management, which is also difficult today, right? Using these Graph Search APIs. And also another effect might be compliance issues. So you might want to reflect the same data that you have in your data source into the Microsoft Graph Index. Once you delete some content from your data source, you might want that exact replication into Microsoft Graph. So this requires timely purging of deleted content to ensure data freshness. And all these logics are pretty complex, and you need to write and develop these logics on your own in case you're using the Graph Search APIs. But what we are doing today with the SDK is packaging a lot of these capabilities together into what we are calling the Microsoft Graph Platform, the Graph Connector Platform, right? So Graph Connector Platform is a platform that has been built over the last few years on which our out-of-the-box connectors are working. So all the connectors that I talked about, which come out of the box, the native connectors like ServiceNow, Confluence, Jira, FileShare, all these connectors are running on this exact same Graph Connector platform, which we are enabling through the SDK for customers also to leverage this to write their own connectors. So this is a really mature platform, and also going forward, whatever updates we make will be made available to you through this platform. So this platform today has the capability of getting the data from the connector, doing crawl management, full as well as incremental crawls, then scheduling these crawls, triggering these crawls, the integration with the Microsoft Admin Center, right? So you have a M365 Admin Center where you are managing your out-of-the-box connectors today. But if you write your custom connector using Graph Search APIs, you need a separate admin center. You can't monitor and manage them from the same M365 Admin Center. But if you come through the Microsoft Graph Connector SDK and write your custom connector, you will be able to start monitoring, managing all your custom connectors as well through the M365 Admin Center. Apart from that, we also have delete detection, difference detection, cycle detection, identity mapping, graph ingestion. Everything is essentially taken care of by the connector platform. And the only thing that we expect from you when you're developing your custom connector is just to tell us how to read from the data, how to read the identities, and what is the data source schema. So this is all we need from you in terms of development of a custom connector. And we are abstracting all these capabilities that earlier you might have to write on your own into the Graph Connector platform. So apart from that, just to summarize the benefits, you get a fast and efficient development. And so today you can, with this Graph Connectors SDK, you can write in any 11 languages of your choice. So we have support for up to 11 languages. Your data sources can be cloud or on-prem data sources. So the connector platform that we already talked about is already really robust, and you can leverage the Microsoft Admin Center to manage your custom as well as out-of-the-box connectors all in one single place. So moving on, this is how we have designed the architecture so that you can write your connector code in multiple languages. So the Microsoft Connector platform hosts the orchestration framework, essentially the framework which manages and schedules all your crawls, and it talks via remote procedural calls to your line of business connector code that you have written. And your line of business connector code is responsible for talking to the data source and getting that data. And our Microsoft Connector platform will make calls to your line of business connector to get the data and pass it on further through the admin center into Microsoft Graph. So this RPC framework is actually based on gRPC, which is open source, and it works in a client server based model. So our Microsoft Graph Connector platform hosts the client, and your connector line of business connector code hosts the server, and our client makes calls to this server to get the data. And we talk over a TCP port, and this is, you can stream unidirectionally and bidirectionally. And what enables these 11 languages to make this framework language neutral and platform neutral is something called protocol buffers. So these are ways to share contracts between two systems in a gRPC model. And this helps us to easily create distributed applications and services, right? So this is a brief on how gRPC works. So the server can be implemented in any language, and it is independent of whatever language the client is essentially written in, right? So your gRPC client can be in Ruby or Android Java, and the server can be in C++ server. So although they are in different languages, we can talk to each other using this gRPC framework. So how this applies to our entire line of business connector SDK is essentially this Microsoft Connector platform, on which I already said that our out-of-the-box connectors are already running, like let's say Jira on-prem connectors or file share connectors. So we host the gRPC client inside this connector platform, and it talks over HTTP to a gRPC server, which is inside, which again hosts your connector implementation, the connector code. And you can have multiple connectors that are running that can talk to the same connector platform. So let's say you install one Microsoft Connector platform, and you have 3 different data sources for which you want to write, let's say, line of business connectors, or even you want to run your out-of-the-box connectors, right? So you can have multiple connectors running on just talking to one single connector platform. And these should reside on the same virtual machine, the connector platform and your line of business connector code. So you need to define the port over which each of these connectors are running, so that this gRPC client can talk to each of these servers. And accordingly, if you update the configuration file, these connectors will start working, right? So just to go quickly over how the entire flow is of developing a line of business connector. So you can download through an IDE if you are using C#, then you can download a template that we are already providing, and it has a project structure. You open up, write the code to read data from the data source. As an admin, you need to install, let's say, this connector platform and and update the configuration files, and you need to run the line of business connector code that you have written. And finally, you go to the Microsoft Admin Center, and it's a very familiar flow of publishing an out-of-the-box connector. So it's same for the custom connector as well. All you need to do is you need to update this manifest file and fill in the necessary details to publish your line of business connector. So how this works in C# is that you already have a template. So you can go to Visual Studio extensions and download this template. And once you install the template and search, you go to create a new project and you try to search for the template, something like this will come up. And once you install the template and you create a project using this template, it already has a project structure with some sample code inside it. So once you finish coding, update the code, it will generate a exe file. And this needs to run on the same VM where you're running your Graph Connector platform. And you define the connector port over which this connector is running so that this Graph Connector platform can talk to your particular connector. And once you update some configuration files, you complete the testing, and you feel that it is okay for deploying in your production environment, you can directly go to, let's say, you can directly go to the admin center, and you can, through the custom connector option, this is a new option that you'll start seeing. You can update the manifest file and go through the familiar steps to publish the connector. So to give you a brief on how this works directly in Visual Studio. So in Visual Studio, I already have this connector template installed, which has this project. So this project has a server CS file, where you essentially create the server and you mention the port over which this particular connector is running, and you define a connector ID. This will already be defined, automatically be generated for you. You can change it as well. This is a unique connector ID for your particular connector. And then we have some dummy database that we are trying to create and reading. And over here in connection management service, it's a very familiar flow. First, you define how the authentication works. So in validate authentication, you tell us how we can talk to and watch what authentication we can use to get access to the data source. Then next, once this is done, you can tell us how, if there is any custom configuration that we require to access this data source. And once that validation done, you tell us what is the data source schema. So what is the schema of the data source that we'll be expecting. And finally, in the connector crawler implementation, this is where you essentially write the code so that you can essentially crawl through the data source, get the data, and send it to our connector platform. So we also have a checkpointing mechanism so that in case there are any crashes, this can automatically resume the crawl once your connector server, or let's say your connector platform, is up and running wherever the issue went wrong. So once the coding is complete, we also have this testing utility. So in this test utility, we have the test cases, and you can simply press the different options that are there. Let's say you press 1 and you want to test whether the connector platform can talk to the connector service. And it will show options like whether it is success, where it is failing. So how this works is that I have a configuration file where I've essentially said that this is the connector ID, which is running on this particular port. And this test utility essentially tests whether this connector is actually running on that port and whether our Graph Connector platform can talk to that. Similarly, you can run the other test cases, and once everything passes, you can go into Microsoft Admin Center, go to add, and you start seeing the new option that I had just shown. So today you will see all these other options, which are essentially the out-of-the-box connectors. And this is the new option called custom connector that will come up. And you can paste the manifest file. So I have a very simple manifest file over here. So the format is present over here, as well as we'll send it over in the documentation. And you can click next, and it's a very similar flow of you can give any name. And this is exactly same as how today's out-of-the-box connectors work. and you can click next and follow the process to essentially publish your connection. And it will hardly take 2 minutes to essentially publish this connection. And once you're done, I already have a custom connector that is published and up and running. So once you're done, it will be in something like a ready state. And you can open this and actually see what are the crawl statistics, when was it last crawled, number of items that were indexed, everything from the admin center in one single dashboard. So you don't need to go anywhere else to actually check what is going on with your data source. Like you can see over here, I have an index limit of 700,000 and I have indexed 5,489 items, as well as what is the crawl schedule. If you want to change the schedule, you can go into edit and change it. Similarly, all the benefits that are there, or all the capabilities that are there for the out-of-the-box connectors, comes to these custom connectors as well. So that is all from my side in terms of demo. And in terms of timelines, so today we are in private preview, and we expect to be in public preview by calendar year 22. And that is the same timeline around which a lot of our other experiences are also coming up. So in case you integrate your third-party custom connector data by then you can also onboard into these other experiences like Viva Topics integration, e-discovery support around calendar year 2022 H2 timeline. So that is all from my side. I also have a link if you want to sign up for this private preview. I'll share it on the chat. And if there are any further questions, I'll take it on the chat and I'll be here online. Please feel free to post your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. Really, really cool stuff and awesome stuff. So let's jump, Anu, directly on your screen and let's have a look on the Microsoft Teams meeting app sample with link unfurling.
Thanks, Vesa. Hello, everyone. Give me a sec to set up my presentation.
I can see the slides. Take it away.
Okay, awesome. So hello, everyone. I'm Anuj Gupta. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft. We recently added a new sample for meeting apps, Building Unfurling. And in this session, we'll cover the important implementation details that will help you build similar scenarios in Teams. So let's get to the agenda. I'll give you a brief overview of the main scenario this sample implements, and then we'll look into the platform capabilities the sample consumes. We'll do a live demo of the application, and we'll also go through the code and cover important implementation details. And if time permits, we'll do a live Q&A session at the end. Otherwise, we'll answer the questions asynchronously in chat. So scenario overview, the sample illustrates a common scenario where a user shares a link to a resource, which is a dashboard in the sample, with a group of users, and they collaborate to review it in a meeting. Sounds simple, right? But let's see how this looks like in Microsoft Teams. So here you have a user who shares a link to a dashboard with other users, Alan and John. And you will notice that as soon as user enters the link, the card is attached to that message with dashboard details. Details like a preview image, a couple of action buttons to view or review it in a meeting. Let's see what these buttons do. Let's try the review in meeting button. So here, a user clicks on the review in meeting action, which creates a new online meeting and sets up everything for the users. By setup, I mean you have the app added to that meeting. You can also see that there's a side panel tab where the dashboard that was originally shared is available for users to look at. And then user also automatically joins this meetings. If you think about it, there are a lot of manual steps that have been avoided in this workflow. For example, you don't need to create a meeting by yourself, or you don't need to add an application or a tab, or even click to join that meeting. Everything is done by the app in single click. And this solution is context aware. That means if you're doing something like this, you're sharing a link to a resource in an ongoing meeting, which is pretty common. It sets up that ongoing meeting for review. So you would have the app added to your existing ongoing meeting and also have the tab that points to the exact resource that we're looking at. Now, there are many platform capabilities that the sample consumes to build the experience. We'll go over a few important ones. So at high level, the app has a bot which helps in link unfurling. attaching an adaptive card to a message, and authenticating the user. It also has a web application that powers the meeting side panel tab. A task module helps in authenticating the user in a task module, consumes Graph APIs to set up a meeting, and also execute deep links to automatically join a meeting. Let's understand what these capabilities mean. Link unfurling. So apps can provide customized experience when a user shares a link that is associated with them. When we say associated, apps can define a list of domains that are associated with the application. For instance, you see we have a domain property here, and we've added one domain over here. It's important to note that you should only add domains that you're in control of. So something like xyz.com, where you don't really own XYZ, isn't something that will go through. So once you do that, you have a capability to send back a collapsed and expanded card. We'll look at what these mean precisely when we go over this in live demo. Adaptive cards. I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of this. These are platform agnostic snippets of UI, which are authored in JSON, so it's pretty easy to author them. And then, apps and services can openly exchange them. When they're delivered to any specific client, the JSON is transformed into native UI that automatically adapts to its surroundings. So be it Teams, Outlook, or Office, on mobile, web, or desktop, it'll just work for you. And you don't have to worry about the UI elements, how they look like in mobile, in different aspect ratio. All of that is taken care of for you. In this sample, we consume the adaptive card to attach to the message that user is sending. Meeting side panel. So in Teams, you can develop experiences in meetings. In fact, you can integrate tabs, pods, and missing extensions in each stage of the meeting cycle, which is pre-meeting, in-meeting, or post-meeting. In the sample, we integrate a side panel. You can see the side panel over here to let users view the dashboard that was shared them to review. It also sets up meeting, which is in pre-meeting stage, where we add the app, we add the tab and specific tab that points to the resource that was shared. Task module. You can create model pop-up experiences in your Teams app with task modules. These are really useful to display rich content, or when you want to complete a complex task. In this screenshot, you see that you have a pop-up experience here, which we call task module, and user, the app is trying to get user input, which is relatively complex to get in a message within a chat. So these come in very handy, and they're built using an iframe in desktop or web views in mobile. So everything is in your control. You can power it with web app, and then you can control how UI elements look like and what kind of input output you want to give to the user. And also, this can be launched from almost anywhere. So you can launch them from tabs or bot messages or adaptive cards. In the sample, we'll see how we launch it from adaptive cards, and then also missing extensions. Deep links. So you can create links to information and features within Teams. When you do so, Teams will automatically navigate the users to whatever resource you're pointing to. For example, you can create a link to a tab or an item within a tab, to an existing chat, and much more. The sample here executes a deep link, which lets the user automatically join the meeting that's created on the fly. So now that we've covered Teams platform capabilities consumed in the sample, let's take another look at the scenarios we covered earlier and understand how it works end-to-end. So the same scenario where user shares the link with other users, and then it gets unfurled into an adaptive card with list of actions. Let's see how this workflow works. So here we have a Teams user who's interacting with the Teams app, the Teams client or services, and then your sample app. The sample app here represents the bot, and we'll specifically be talking about how bot interacts in this workflow. So user shares a link to a dashboard in Teams, and Teams will determine if that link is associated to your app. If it is, then it invokes an app-based link query to your app. This is where your app is in control of what it wants to return back. Now, in the sample, we do an optional user sign-in. We do a user sign-in to authenticate the user This is primarily useful if you're looking at a resource that's not public and you want to ensure that only users who have access to it are able to access it. So an optional sign-in, which is a one-time sign-in, and we'll look at how it looks like in end-user experience. But once user is signed in, the app then returns back an adaptive card with preview details like image and detail and action buttons. And then teams will automatically insert that card into Compose box and user can send it to continue with the workflow. Let's look at the other scenario we're looking at, which is review in a meeting. Here, again, a quick recap. User clicks on the review in meeting action, and that opens a task module where you see the app is processing this request, and then user is automatically given an option to join a meeting. So in this workflow, again, we have a Teams user who is going to click on this review in meeting action. We have Teams client or services. We have the task module, which is powered by the web app. And then we have the sample app. Here, sample app represents bot and another post endpoint that we've exposed to set up a meeting. So let's start with the workflow. User clicks on review in meeting action. Okay, this is a one-time app installation. So imagine you're sharing a link in a chat with users who don't have the app installed. So what happens? Teams will automatically handle that scenario. They'll bring up the UI, which will prompt user to add the app. And once user adds the app, it'll automatically continue with the workflow that originated this installation. That is, it'll launch the task module for the user. The task module works in this way. Teams client will open your pop-up window, but it'll also reach out to your bot saying that an invoke was fired to open a task module. And this is where your app is in control of, showing what it wants to load in that task module. Here, the sample app returns back a link, which specifically points to review a specific resource in a meeting, and Teams then opens that link in the task module. Again, because this process involves, user creating a meeting and doing extra, steps like setting up a meeting, installing app, we do require user consent, which is again a one-time user consent to get certain permissions. If user consents, the app continues with the workflow, and if you see, there's no user interaction beyond clicking on review and meeting action, other than one-time actions related to app installation or user consent for certain permissions. The app will then fire setup review or setup meeting request to the web app, where it will then create an online meeting, install an app to the meeting, add a tab with link to dashboard, and return back the meeting details. And the meeting details will have a link to join that specific meeting, which will then be executed in Teams client, and user will be able to join the meeting. I hope that helps you understand, the end-to-end workflow of how it works. While it looks quite simple from user's perspective, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So let's switch to a live demo. I'll share my screen. So here I have a user, let's call him user administrator. And then here I have another user, Megan. And they're in a common chat. So let's share a resource with Megan. So here what you see is that I'm sharing a link to a dashboard, and that gets unfurled into a card, which has options to view or review it in a meeting. Let's send this card. And if user clicks on view, this is a stage view. It's not the main scenario this app implements, but something really useful where you want to display information in large window with rich media content, you can do so. But then let's look at it from another user's perspective. So you get this option to view or review it in a meeting. Again, you can view it just like the other user did, but let's look at what review in meeting does. So here we have a task module, which is now processing your request. And as it is processing, it should create a new meeting and set up everything for the user. So we see that user is prompted with an option to join a meeting. Let's see. Okay, so this is the meeting. And then if you see, we have an app that is already added to this meeting. And when user clicks on that, you can look at the resource. And this is the exact resource that was originally shared. And now you can share it with other users. If any other user in the chat clicks on the review meeting action, they will be added to the same meeting instance. And they can now collaborate, over the content that the original user is sharing with them. I think it's taking some time to load the stage view. Okay, we have it here. So that's great. But let's look at the code that's powering this experience. Here is the project, and the web project basically has the bot implementation and the controller APIs and the client app. The domain is where we handle the main logic to implement or setting up the review and meeting based on the context where it's shared. And then we have infrastructure, which provides the underlying infrastructure, like where's the resource info coming from, or if you can give me the cards, which I want to display in the chat, etc. Let's start with the pod implementation. So we talked about link unfurling, and here we have the invoke action, which is called when users share the link with the users in a chat. And this is where your app is in control of. It validates the URL that it's pointing to a relevant resource. And this is where we optionally check for user sign in. If they are not signed in, we ask the user to sign in. We send back a sign in action response, which when user signs in, then again calls back this action again. And if everything is good, we then check if the user, ideally we should check if the user tries to access the resource. It's kept in a sample because this is heavily dependent on how you implement this. And then it returns back a card with information on preview image and option to review it. We talked about expanded and collapsed card. Expanded card, I'll quickly show you what they look like, but expanded card is the card we were looking at where you have list of actions and the preview image, and collapsed card is basically a small preview where you don't really have an option to add action buttons and other stuff. And then the other important implementation we should look at is how do we set up the review? So the client or the task module, eventually when it processes the request, validates that things are right, sends up a request to your app and says that, hey, set up an online meeting for this request. And what the app does is it validates data, checks if the resource really exists. If it does, it prepares the conversation context. This is where we know if it's a group conversation or team, and whether it's a team chat. And then it calls a setup meeting async function here, which essentially creates a unique external ID for a meeting. Here it's a combination of conversation ID and a resource ID. So anytime you share the same resource in another conversation, it's going to create a unique or another online meeting. While in the same chat, it's going to point to the same online meeting. We cache the results so that we can return quickly for subsequent requests. But when it's running the first time, this will not return anything. So we create the meeting object that needs to be created, and then we ask the meeting setup class to set up the meeting. Let's see what it does. And here we have options to look at which context we are running in, and then based on the context, set up the app and the tab for the users. So that's from the demo. We have a list of resources that you can point to, like link to sample app and parts and all the other capabilities we talked about. You can refer to them if you want to learn about these features in detail. And that concludes our session. Thanks for listening to the session.
Thank you, Anui. Let's do the questions on the chat. Thank you for that one. Let's then jump on Seb's screen. We chatted with Seb, and he said that this should be definitely doable in the amount of time what we have. But let's see. Seb, take it away.
Awesome, Vesa. Thank you so much. Folks, we are at the end of our journey with the MGT, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. And today we're going to talk about Teams. How can we use Teams to leverage the Microsoft Graph Toolkit component? So I'm going to go quickly over the basics of MGT for the ones that are new to it. So what is the Graph Toolkit? It is a collection of reusable and framework agnostic components and auth providers that allows you to access and work with the Microsoft Graph. So the components are fully functional, they're ready-made, they can use them. It's kind of a drag and drop in your app and you're good to go. You can use components that are already connected to Microsoft Graph, which saves you tons and tons of time works with any web browser and any web framework. So you're using Angular, React, plain JavaScript, anything, you can always use the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. Why would you care about the toolkit? First, it cuts on dev time. So you get to your business goals way faster. It is beautiful, but it's flexible. So if you love how Microsoft 365 looks like and you want to get some of that in your app, you're good to go. We already have that. But if you want to customize it, you can also do it on your own terms. And it works everywhere, either on the web, in Electron, on a Teams app, in a SharePoint framework page, anywhere. It just works. And you know what? MGT loves Microsoft Teams. It is a match made in heaven. There's a lot of components that are very specific to Teams, but also that are really a great way to create apps that brings user context in there. So how do we start? I'm going to do two very, very quick demo. One, we're going to use YoTeams, which is a Microsoft Teams community-driven Yeoman generator, which is awesome and super simple to use. I'm going to go through this. The only thing you're going to have to do, you're going to have to install Teams, the Teams generator, sorry. And then you're going to have to say YoTeams. You're going to create your app, a basic app. Then afterwards, you're going to install your MGT React components. In my case, I used React. And then you're going to want to install one authentication provider that will allow you to get access to Microsoft Teams, the context and the authentication. So you're going to be fully authenticated. So let's go on to the demo very quickly. And let me do that for now. So you can see on the right that we have an MGT tab. Right here on the right and on the left, we have a little bit of code. I'm going to just zoom in just a little bit so you can see a little bit better. So what do we have? Here we have a regular, very regular client.ts, which is kind of our entry point of our app. Nothing special there. Teams, when you're building apps, a vast majority of the times when you will build a web surface, you will be building a tab. And these tabs in YoTeams, they all have their own small apps, if you'd say. So you're going to find, for example, my YoTeams tab here, and this is where all my app would be for this specific tab. So let me go and see what's in there. So a couple of things. First, you will want to use our providers. You will want to use our specific provider, our Teams MSAL2 provider that allows you to have a great connection with Microsoft Teams and will handle the authentication for you. And the only thing you'll have to do is to say, hey, I am running in Teams. As here, you know, we're using, if I'm in Teams, yes, well, I'm in Teams. I'm going to reuse the library here. And I'm going to use this configuration here, which tells my app that this is the app, the AAD app that I want to connect to. This is what are the scopes that I want to use. And this is where I want to use my authentication, because authentication in non-SSO scenarios will be happening through a pop-up. If you want to go and set up SSO, then you will not even have a pop-up. It will work flawlessly without building this, but I didn't want to confuse folks to add a little bit of complexity to this solution, so I kept it as simple as possible. So once this happens, the only thing you have to do now, leverage MGT, which means, in our case, to use the components of MGT. For example, here, having a login component, and here, having a welcome person for me with these kind of things, which allows you to build something like this. For example, have my login component right here. I'm already logged in, so I don't have to go through the login, but here I can have my full people card, and I can drag and drop and see all these kind of things. The beauty about using Teams as a surface to build your apps is now you also have the ability, with the exact same bits of code, the exact same 100% the same lines of code, you can actually now build apps that will land inside office.com. So for example, I have it here. I have office.com here, and I can find that I have a YoTeams app that is available right there. and I can use it, and it has the exact same behavior that you have in Teams. So now that you went from a Teams developer to an Office.com developer, allowing your users to connect to more of your data. And finally, you also have the exact same capability within Outlook. So now you have the ability to have this and exactly the same capabilities. The beauty here, it also integrates natively with the theming engine of Microsoft Teams. So if I go here and I put it in dark, now all my tab is now fully dark and looks really, really great on my UI. Second thing that I wanted to do, I'm going to go quick for that. If you want to try out Teams, building apps with Teams with the Teams Toolkit, which is a Microsoft-provided framework to build apps in both .NET and JavaScript and TypeScript, we also have a sample that is available. So the only thing you will have to do is to go to your Teams Toolkit tab, click on View Samples, and install here the Contact Exporter using the Graph Toolkit. What it's going to give you, it's going to give you this great app that we can find here that has a capability of searching for folks. I'm going to search for Adele right here, and where I will be able to export this list of folks straight to an Excel spreadsheet. What's the beauty here? This sample uses entirely SSO. So you don't even need to log in. The only pop-up you're going to get is the first time for consent if you don't have already consented to this app. But besides that, there is no login required with this. So a really, really great example to see the full set of capabilities that MGT can enable with Microsoft Teams. So let me go back quickly to the slides before I hand it off to you. There's a couple of resources. Go to our repo, aka.ms/mgt. You can look at our docs, at our issues. You can even contribute. You want to see all the samples that I just showed today? They're all available on our sandbox samples. You want to play with our playground, or you want to learn more about MGT? Everything is there. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Sebastian. Really, really cool to see those live and awesome demos. And it's great to see that the Teams V2 SDK, which is still in preview, is already functioning so that you can take the same Teams application. You can expose that not only in Teams, but also in Office and in Outlook, which is really, really cool as well. So for those who might come from a SharePoint framework perspective, that actually integrates with this Teams V2 packaging model in future as well. And all of that is kind of getting automatically. So SPFX is more the hosting side of the house, not the capability side of the house. But all of this is getting nicely integrated to each other. Anyway, thank you, Raideep, and thank you, Anui, and thank you, Sebastian. Really, really cool demos today. Awesome stuff for the community. And just a quick recap, we do have quite a few community calls which are happening in a weekly basis. So we have the platform call, which is weekly. We do have specific monthly community calls and bi-weekly calls. So weekly, we have at least Tuesday and Thursday calls happening every single week. If you're wondering on what are the calls and how to download the invites for them, go to https AKMS M365 BMP. The recording of this call will be available in 24 hours in the Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel at AKMS M365 BMP/videos. And we will, of course, submit a social media post as that will happen. The next call is happening a week from now, 8 a.m. Pacific time, which is then Europe has followed up on US from the time zone. So at least Europe and US are in the same time zone. So that should reduce some of the confusion on the timings. But thank you, everybody, for joining today. Thank you. Please keep the feedback coming. We are building all of these capabilities for you. So your input is super, super crucial for us to understand how we can help you even more. But thanks, everybody, for joining. Let's stay in touch, and we'll be back within this call within a week. Bye-bye.